Alright, welcome back to the channel. I am Kris. Welcome back if it's your first time, and welcome if you're recurring. Yeah, figure that one out. So this is donated request part 4 from Yasin Muhammad. This was well, for some reason I can never say his name. I gotta sneeze. Maybe I don't. Oh, I do. Okay, it happened. It is what it is. We're all going to move on together. You can donate to the channel through the thanks button, and I can't make that promise. I was going to say I will never sneeze again, but I'm going to sneeze again. Oh, I can feel it in the nose. I'm going to sneeze again. You subscribe and thumbs up video so I can sneeze.
Bahrain, and then he sends him to Oman. And while he was in charge of Oman, many people embraced Islam in Oman, because remember, the Muslims would not force the people to embrace Islam. There was no compulsion in religion. They did not force the people of that land to become Muslim, even if they were victorious. But under Amr ibn al-As, many people of Oman became Muslim, and he stayed in that place until the Prophet ﷺ died. So Amr ibn al-As was transitioned to Oman as the governor, as the Amir of Oman, until the death of the Prophet ﷺ. After the Prophet ﷺ passes away, he and Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu together play a pivotal role in Hurub al-Ridda, in the battle with the apostates. Of course, Musaylim al-Kadhab is the false prophet, and he's literally slaughtering Muslims and claiming to be the prophet after Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Al-Hafidh ibn Kathir rahimahullah actually narrates a really interesting incident. He says that Amr ibn al-As actually bumped into Musaylimah himself. He was on his way back to Medina, and he bumped into Musaylimah, the false prophet. So Musaylimah knows Amr, and Amr knows Musaylimah. Musaylimah says, "Have you heard that I'm a prophet like the Prophet of Allah, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?" I said, "Okay, interesting." So he said that Musaylimah then tilted his head and he started to read some of his ridiculous imitation of the Quran. Right? And it's actually narrated in Ibn Kathir. It is ridiculous lines. Musaylimah would basically just put a bunch of rhymes together like poetry and say this came from Allah, and he'd tilt his head in a funny way to show that he was receiving revelation. So he said to Amr, "Ma ra'yuk, what do you think?" Amr said, "Wallahi inni a'lamu annaka la ta'lamu anni a'lamu annaka kadhib." I swear by Allah that you know, that I know, that you know, that I know you're a liar. Like we both know that's a bunch of garbage. Right? And he said, "I just made my way back." Right? Musaylimah didn't put his hands on him, and this was just like, you know that I know, that I know that you know, or something like that. Right? Gets a little confusing even in Arabic. In any case, Amr radiallahu ta'ala anhu serves a critical role under Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, but it's really in the time of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu that we see him shine. And Umar radiallahu anhu had a statement about Amr ibn al-As. قال ما ينبغي لأبي عبد الله أن يمشي في الأرض إلا أميرا. This is a high testimony. He says, it is not befitting for Amr ibn al-As to walk on this earth except as a leader. The man has to be a leader. Some people don't fit except in that position. So he will be a commander, he will be a leader as long as he is alive. And so Khalid radiallahu anhu cutting deep into the Persian Empire, Amr ibn al-As radiallahu ta'ala anhu cutting deep into the Roman Empire, their paths converge in Ajnadin and Yarmouk, and Amr ibn al-As and Khalid and Shurahbil and Abu Ubaidah are all coming together, and now they are bringing the Roman Empire to its knees. After the Romans and the Persians have dominated for so long, they're bringing the Roman Empire to its knees. Now, subhanAllah.
That is pretty cool that two of those military leaders kind of converted, or as you would say, reverted on the same day. Like, that's pretty cool.
Most of Palestine, most of Palestine is actually taken by Amr ibn al-As radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So the entire southern part of Palestine, if you were to take Palestine, if you were to look at the bottom half of it, all of that is Amr ibn al-As radiallahu ta'ala anhu leading his armies in the conquest of Palestine, of Palestine, and basically setting up then Jerusalem to where Abu Ubaidah radiallahu ta'ala anhu will then move forward to negotiate the terms, and Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu will come and will take the keys of Jerusalem peacefully, right? Peacefully. And not exact any type of bloodshed on the Romans, and even bring back the Jewish families that were expelled by the Christians to live peacefully in Jerusalem. But Amr radiallahu anhu is the one who conquers all of that land south of Al-Quds, south of Jerusalem, under Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and brings it all under Islam. He takes Ayla, and then he takes Ramla, and then he gets to the Babylonian fort, and he faces the Amir of the Romans, who's known as Artabun al-Rum. Artabun al-Rum was basically the most intelligent Roman leader. And so the Arabs called him the Amr ibn al-As of the Romans, and the Romans called Amr ibn al-As the Artabun of the Arab. It's really interesting here. So it's kind of like them meeting each other, a meeting of the minds. Extremely intelligent military commanders, and the Artabun of Rome is impossible to outsmart. Amr ibn al-As is impossible to outsmart. When Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu heard that their two armies were meeting, he said, رَمَيْنَا أَرْتَبُونَ الرُّومِ بِأَرْتَبُونِ الْعَرَبِ فَانظُرُوا عَمَّا تَنْفَرِجْ. That we have basically put up against Artabun al-Rum, the Artabun of the Romans, the Artabun of the Arabs, and see which one of them is able to overcome the other. Amr ibn al-As comes up with this risky strategy because he's Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu with him. Remember, Amr used to travel all that land before Islam. He knows the land inside out. But he basically wants to outsmart the man by figuring out what his internal forces are and what his actual palace looks like. So what Amr does is he disguises himself as a messenger of himself. So he actually, it's super risky. He walks in to meet Artabun al-Rum, acting like he's just the ambassador of Amr ibn al-As, like some average Muslim. And while he gets in there, he takes note of everything that's on the inside. He kind of analyzes the place. He's coming up with a plan of how to overcome the guy. And while he is talking to him and interacting with him, Artabun al-Rum actually figures out that it's him. So this guy is too intelligent. And so Artabun al-Rum signals to his guards in a way that Amr catches to basically take him out. So now Amr has to pivot, right? So what does Amr ibn al-As say to him as he sees this all taking place? He says, "Ayyuha al-Amir," said, "Oh, leader, inni qad sami'tu kalamak wa sami'ta kalami. I have heard your words and you have heard my words. Wa inni wahidun min asharatin ba'athana Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu." That I am one of tens of the best of companions that Umar al-Khattab sent. Meaning the leaders of the companions. He doesn't tell him he's Amr ibn al-As. So he says, I'm going to go and get all of them. How about I go and get all of them to come meet you as well with me? Let me go get the 20 or 30 best of the companions to come talk to you. So the Artabun of Rum, he says, oh, this is a great idea. Now I can kill all of them. Like, bring me the 20 or 30 best of the companions and I'll take them all out. So he says, فَذْهَبْ فَأْتِنِي بِهِمْ. Go ahead and go and get your companions with you. So as soon as Amr ibn al-As gets out, Amr ibn al-As radiallahu ta'ala anhu takes off, creates all sorts of diversions. And at that point, he says, خَدَعَنِي الرَّجُلُ. He said, the man deceived me. هَذَا وَاللَّهِ أَدْهَى الْعَرَبِ. This is the most cunning of the Arabs. He got me. He got away, and he got me, and he understands now the internal. And indeed, subhanAllah, he defeated him. Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu defeated him. And this was sort of the last stronghold of the Romans within Palestine, within Palestine. But then, subhanAllah, what does he set his eyes on? Masr, Egypt. Hence why all of the Egyptians love Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu. He set his eyes on Masr. Umar ibn Khattab told Amr ibn al-As, calm down. We already have the Romans and the Persians that we're dealing with. Egypt is a whole nother reign. We don't want to touch Egypt. Leave Masr alone. Amr ibn al-As says, I've got 4,000. They've got 120,000, but I have a plan. Umar ibn Khattab is very skeptical. Now, here's the situation with Egypt. Egypt is under which empire? Under the Roman Empire. Okay? But subhanAllah, it would just so happen that the Persians captured Masr from the Roman control for about a decade during their battles. So it was weakened on the inside. There was still quite a bit of political instability. And here's where it gets very interesting. The Egyptian Christians are Coptic Christians. And they're not welcomed by the Roman Christians, who of course are following a very, I guess, Catholic Christianity, if you will. Just like with the Crusaders, they didn't just kill all the Muslims and the Jews, they killed all the Eastern Christians as well. The Christians of Egypt are not treated like insiders by the Byzantines. And so they're developing a resentment towards them as well. They don't like the way they're being treated by them as well. And Amr ibn al-As is smart. So Amr ibn al-As, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, where does he station himself? Who can tell me? Gaza. Not just that. Amr ibn al-As, radiallahu anhu, stations himself in Rafah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for the people of Rafah. Subhanallah, all the letters between Omar and Amr ibn al-As take place from Rafah to Medina. And Amr radiallahu anhu camps in Rafah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for the people and bring back that blessing. Imagine the Sahaba, the companions there in Rafah. And Amr is negotiating terms with the people of Egypt. And he's speaking to a mindset. He's speaking to the Copts. And he says to them that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, he promised us that one day Allah would open Egypt for us. And when we got there, we should treat them with kindness because they are our kin through our mother Hajar, the mother of Ismail, the mother of Ismail alayhi salam, Hajar. So Christian, or initially they say a Coptic, as Ibn Kathir rahimahullah says, but from Masr. So we were told that we should treat the people of Masr with goodness. So Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu is at the border of Egypt and Palestine, set up in Rafah. And Amr radiallahu ta'ala anhu comes to know that the Romans, the Byzantines, are basically recollecting themselves in Masr so that they can fight against the Muslims there. And Amr radiallahu anhu sends a letter to Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, I'm going in. Umar gets the letter. Uthman says to Umar, send a letter to Amr ibn al-As, tell him not to go into Egypt. But if the letter reaches him while he's already in Egypt, then go ahead. So basically, if he's still in Gaza, if he's still in Rafah, tell him come back to Medina, tell him stop. But if he's already in Egypt, then tell him Bismillah. And if he needs reinforcements, we'll send reinforcements. This is, of course, summarizing for the sake of time much of what happens in this communication. So Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu knows that the messenger of Umar is coming, and he happens to see Uqba ibn Amr coming with the letter, and this is Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu. He wants to go forth in Egypt. So he goes into Masr because he has a feeling what's in that letter, and he receives the letter in Egypt. So he could say to Umar ibn al-Khattab, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, the letter came to me while I was already in Masr. And he goes forth in Egypt. And of course, they are able to take Masr. What's the oldest city in Egypt before testing the Egyptians here? Don't say Qahira.
I was going to say Cairo, but it's not Alexandria. I don't know. Hold on, let me go back.
What's the oldest city in Egypt before testing the Egyptians here? Don't say Qahira, don't say Cairo. Scandaria, Alexandria. He's able to take Alexandria.
Oh, Alexandria was okay. Why did I think it wasn't Alexandria? Was Alexandria a city before Alexander the Great came along? And he just renamed it? So, in essence, it's still the same city. It's just got a new name. That must have been it.
And then Amr ibn al-As is able to, with many of the Copts, by the way, even in Egypt, is able to exert control over Masr, bring Masr into Islam. With just 4,000 men, subhanAllah. Just 4,000 men. And the Byzantines flee, Masr. They flee Egypt as well. And while he is there, many of the people become Muslim, by the way, because of the way that they were treated. In fact, many of the books that talk about the history of Muslim empire living under Muslim rule talk about the treatment, particularly of the people of Egypt under Amr ibn al-As radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and under the early Muslims. The way they were treated fairly, as opposed to the way that the Romans treated them, even though they're technically all Christians. Amr radiallahu ta'ala anhu takes Skandariyya and he builds the city, and I know this has gone long, so I'll sum up inshallah ta'ala. He builds the city known as Fustat, which is the city of tents. Umar radiallahu anhu told Amr ibn al-As that don't make the base of the Muslims in Skandariyya because it needs to be closer to Medina, it needs to be closer inland. He didn't like the idea of Muslims being on a border town to the water as their place. So he said, you need to stay close, so build something closer. So Amr radiallahu anhu, in those tents, where those...
Why not on the water? For fear that, a navy would come and attack them?
Tents are, builds out the city of Fustat, which is today known as what? Old Cairo. So Qahira, which comes later on, 3 centuries later, actually becomes, absorbs what was Fustat, the city that he would develop. He turns it into an amazing city. Ubadat ibn Samit radiallahu anhu architects it. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma moves there. This becomes, outside of Medina, Fustat becomes a place where so many Sahaba live in the same neighborhood. And they build a masjid. And what is that masjid called until today? Masjid Amr ibn al-As. So the very famous Masjid Amr ibn al-As is actually where they established themselves in Masr, in Egypt, that first time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restore it back to its glory and restore Rafah and Gaza back to its glory and descend upon it tranquility and ease and victory as he once did with this small group of believers. Allahumma ameen. Amr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was dying at the age of 90 years old, and subhanAllah, I just want to quote to you the conversations between him and his son at his death. Sahih Muslim, as Amr is dying, he's talking to his son Abdullah ibn Amr about what's happening. And he's starting to feel regret over the phases of his life. And Abdullah is trying to give him hope, and Amr says to him that I divide my life into 3 phases. There was the first phase where I fought against the Prophet ﷺ, and if I would have died in that phase, I would have certainly been from the people of hellfire. Then he said, and there was the second phase in which I embraced Islam, and I was alongside the Prophet ﷺ, and if I would have died then, I would have been certain that I'm from the people of paradise. But he said, afterwards, I just don't know about myself. There was politics, there was fitna, there was a lot that Amr radiallahu anhu got involved with, and indeed he actually made mistakes, radiallahu anhu, during the course of the fitna. He's like, I don't know, this third phase of my life, I don't know which of my states I will be in when I pass away. So Abdullah says to him, ما هذا الجزع? What is this fear of yours? وقد كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يدنيك ويستعملك. Prophet ﷺ used to bring you close to him, and he used to put you in charge of important things. Like clearly the Prophet ﷺ loves you. And he said, أي بني قد كان ذلك. He said, oh my son, indeed it was like that. وسأخبرك, and I will tell you, أي والله ما أدري أحبا كان أم تألفا. I don't know if the Prophet ﷺ did that because he really loved me, or the Prophet ﷺ was trying to soften my heart, like he was trying to bring me along because he knew how hard my heart was. But he said, I can't rely on that. ولكن أشهد على رجلين أنه فارق الدنيا وهو يحبهما. But I can tell you 2 men that the Prophet ﷺ left this world loving. Ibn Sumayya wa ibn Abd. Ammar ibn Yasir radiallahu anhu and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So I know those 2 men, like they're different. The Prophet ﷺ left this world loving them, the early muhajirin, and they should be sure of themselves. But me, I don't know. And then he looked up and he made this dua. قال اللهم إنك أمرت بأمور. Oh Allah, you commanded us to do certain things. ونهيت عن أمور, and you forbade us from doing certain things. تركنا كثيرا مما أمرتنا. We left off much of what you used to command us to do. ورتعنا في كثير مما نهيت. and we unfortunately indulged in things that you told us not to indulge in. Allahumma la ilaha illa ant. Oh Allah, there is no God but you. And Abdullah says that he raised his finger to the sky and he kept on at that point saying, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, until he passed away saying, La ilaha illallah. So Allah granted him death, this man radiallahu ta'ala anhu, upon La ilaha illallah over the age of 90 years old. He only narrated about 40 ahadith, but the khair, the goodness that we see that came out of the ummah through him is plentiful. We ask Allah to accept from him and to forgive us for our shortcomings. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that as he descended goodness and victory upon that land, that he does so again. And that as we read about the glory of Rafah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our people in Rafah and in Gaza again, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restore Misr, restore Egypt as a place of glory as well, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us as an ummah for our shortcomings. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khaira. Inshallah ta'ala, next week we'll continue with Ikramah ibn Abi Jahl. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That was good, but yeah, that was a weird deathbed confession. You know, I would have been in hellfire, I would have been in paradise, but now I don't know. Yeah. That's quite a conundrum. Yeah, no, I mean, I think from what I remember about the fitna, there was a lot of questionable decisions made. But he can't take that on, you know, as personal blame. He made bad decisions, okay, sure. But there was a lot of bad decisions made. And I don't think one or two bad decisions, if you made them thinking that, you know, if you just made them because they weren't bad decisions, they were just decisions that you made because you didn't care about, you know, the death of someone or the death of people, that's different. But if you're trying to make a decision to save people and to stop violence, I think that's okay. Because it backfires doesn't mean it was a bad decision on your part. Somebody else decided they didn't like your decision, and they, you know, and I'm just speculating. I don't know everything that was done. But yeah, that's I guess a bit of a scary part, you know, at the end of your life where you're not sure, you know. In the end, you know, who knows? We're all not sure. Well, I'm going to end this here. That was good. I'm going to end this here. He was a much better man than his father. Much better man than his father. But I hope you enjoyed it. I did. And until next time, have a good day, have a good night.